So good afternoon to everybody here, to our nice group of generative art groupies and doers and lovers. We are going into our last half day, and yeah, we have some more young artists and subjects in the new world of NFT and Web3 and later on artificial intelligence as well. So our next talk will be moderated by Clara Herrmann. She is the head of so-called Junge Akademie, which is the Young Academy, and the international residency program of the Academy of Arts here in Berlin. She studied literature, law, and cultural management before, and will moderate our next talk round that is called Art That Breaks Down Old Boundaries. Anna Lucia, she's an educated engineer and an artist, and also Alexander Grasser, PhD candidate as an architect at the University of Graz in Austria, and he is experimenting with real-time collaborative digital art. And finally, Bernhard Nissler. He is much better known in the community as CryptoWiener. He is also from Vienna, so this is just by incident that we have two Austrians here in the round. He's a real well-known guy here in the NFT scene.
Yes, thank you very much for the intro and the invite to Susanne and everyone for being here. It's a pleasure. We would like to now talk a bit about bending the rules, but maybe also mending the rules in the field of generative art, code, its representation also in the classic art world, and also a tiny bit about generative AI if you have time. I was very intrigued to learn about your practices, so let's dive right into this and into your creation and thoughts. We would like to show a few works and talk about technical foundations as well as philosophical practices as artists. And Anna, I would like to start with your work. Please open Anna Lucia's slides, please. Yes, so here in the first slide we see the series 33 million, where you contrast traditional references of rich and detailed craftworks. It's needlework samples with their own reductive and minimal processes. And the next image is from the continuous project Ovenstove, pronounce that right, where you explore and experiment with embroidery samplers. And this work here is about generative tattoo, again including traditional forms of tattoo making. It's a pick and poke method, stick and poke method, and the boundaries that you actually break in your work are those of craft, art, and automation. And so, what fascinates you about merging of technology and traditional craft?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I think I like that question a lot because I don't have one answer. But before I dive into the multitude of answers that I have, I just want to express that I'm incredibly grateful to be here today and want to thank Susanna and the whole team for setting this up. I think it's incredibly special that we're all here together. And I think to dive into your question, breaking down these boundaries between craft and code, maybe nice to bring up the previous. But I think there's two sides to this answer. I think like I said, there's a lot of different parts of it, and one of it has to do with me, who I am and how my brain works and what I relate to, and the other one I think speaks to more like a broader universal and societal ideas. And if I speak first to my person, and something that has come up with many of the artists here is that I think in systems, as Frieder said it yesterday, you think the image. I think systems, and this is a way that I can express myself. So this is the code part of my practice, these systems, because although they could be expressed in different ways, I think code is a very easy medium to embed those systems and then explore them, especially me using randomness, setting up the system, and then exploring this output space. At the same time, another medium that I gravitate towards and work in very easily is textile. already since from a very young age. I learned how to sew when I was in my early teens. I got a sewing machine, and these two spaces are very natural for me to navigate, so to also give expression to these systems. So this is the personal side. But I think there's like a broader thing to be answered between craft and code. I mean, it came up today, it was mentioned craft cannot be code and cannot be art. And I was, you know, on my seat like this when that was mentioned, because I think yes, perhaps because craft sometimes has a function, but I think also that has to do with often the people making these craft objects weren't seen as artists, and that's something that I like to address in my work, and at the same time also code, because people said, oh, this is used to maybe calculate missile trajectories, so therefore that's not art. So they have that in common, and I think both textile crafts and code, they're systematic, so they have that in common. But at the same time, they're very opposites from each other. One is a very automated, rapid, fast process, and the other side of it is, you know, very slow and handmade. So there's juxtaposition between them as well. So I think, like I said, there's not one answer, but like all these multitudes that are embedded between these two things is something that I keep coming back to in my practice.
Thank you so much. We carry on with the quick intros before we enter into discussions. Alexander, let us go to your work. So please, the slides by Alexander Grasser. Yes, perfect. In the first slide here, is that actually right? That's elasticity, right? Yeah, true. In the first slide here we see Electricity. That's a series of generative artworks released in 2022. Yeah, here it also says that on the platform FX Hash. It explores variations through code. And slide 2, let's have a look. And also slide 3, show the work Metaform, co-creating open architectures, which is a community-generated space sculpture. It explores variation through code and participation. And the boundaries that you break is with a focus on interaction, participation, and collectivity. So my question to you would be, can you explain a bit why co-creation and community-generated art matters to you? And can you give an example of a process?
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question. Also, thank you to Susanne and the whole team for the invitation. It's really an honor to be here. So maybe I explain a little bit my context. So I'm trained as an architect. Was an expert in parametric design and generative setups to generate buildings. The inefficient thing is a building is something that is built only once. So it's a very wasteful thing. But we're obsessed with variation. So this variation through code is something that I'm interested in from the beginning on, by creating my own tools and my own workflows. And in the art world, when I started creating these interactive works, for example, the elasticity, I really explored this freedom to generate variation at no additional costs. Like it's a very fun thing to do. But I really enjoyed also increasing the interactivity so that people can contribute to a certain setup, a generative system. And this is something I explored now since the last 6 years as a PhD candidate by inviting my students also to contribute to generative systems. And this is kind of opening up a wide range of projects that I developed. And this is probably the peak of these projects where I created together with Alexandra, she's also here in the room, we created a software basically for the Metaspace exhibition at the Francisco Carolinum, where people could build together with us this sculpture. So we had a software that was open for 2 weeks basically online, minted also as an NFT. And we captured all the contributions. So like 50 structures were generated in this time period. And at some point, we chose to bring one to the museum as a built artifact. And I consider it also a bit like a long form, like a generative series of works that kind of generated a huge variation through participation. Kind of this is the two things that I'm really interested in: variation through code and participation. And it's basically my obsession with generative systems and variation.
Thank you so much. Our third artist and guest here tonight is Bernhard from CryptoWiener. Can we open these slides, please? The first image should be the design phase of the Generative project. I practice. You see these funny citizens here that you can buy with Ethereum. And the next one shows a bit of code. That's your collaborator who does that. It's a bit random order as example. And then we see variations of these funny generated pixel figures. And you create Austrian culture on the blockchain, as I found on your website. And as you told me, normally we would sit outside now with a bunch of artists and share stickers and NFT codes. So this is new here. As a collective, you started with NFTs quite early. So you're also breaking boundaries between the digital and the analog space, because now you also moved your figures into real space exhibitions. And I want to know from you, what role do NFTs play for you still, and is the classic art gallery or museum space more interesting now?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. And also Julie is also from CryptoWiener, which is, she's in the crowd and you saw her in the other talk. Yeah, NFTs played a very big role, and also the blockchain, for our digital art, because with NFTs, collectors could start collecting our art. And it broke up a very, very big new way of expressing our art. Because with generative art, for example, on art blocks, we prepare the different traits, the different hairstyles, and different things our GV-narratives hold in their hands. But we also don't know how the specific output will look like in the end. So the collector also gets part of the process of creating our artworks, because basically there is millions of combination possibilities with these different traits we've painted. But we reduced the edition size to 2084 outputs. And we were also curious about the limited edition traits, or the more rare traits. We also included naked traits, which were the mega rare ones. And we were very curious how they look like. You see one up there in the example, which is of course pixelated, so it's okay to show it on stage. And we had two full naked ones, male ones, and we waited for the female ones also. And in the end, it turned out that we got 3 naked males and 2 naked women, which was very nice to see that also the women got minted and created. Because you take a lot of the process of creating of your art out of your hands if you let an algorithm decide which traits should be combined. And later on, because we conquered the metaverse very early, we were also invited for an exhibition in the Okama Museum, where the challenge was to bring our pixelated works to real life, which is not very easy, because in the metaverse you can place something and resize it and color it how you want it. And in the real world, they start with Pantone color codes and size sheets, and it gets really, really hard to produce digital art for the real world. And on the other side, we were also criticized to teleport or translate our digital art into physical statues, because people said they should live just as digital artworks in the digital space. But we found out that it's very important to bring the digital art to the real space, to introduce it to a broader audience.
Very interesting. Let's stay with that question a bit. Thank you for that first answer. Anna, you stretch your works on real canvas. Alexander, you also install sculptures in IRL spaces, and you even put tattoos on real bodies. So for me as curator, this tension, the hybridity of the works, how we present it, what audience we have is quite interesting. So how do you value museum space or not, also when you think about the decentralization aspect?
Yeah, I think I put myself in a bind where both, code is hard to be seen as art, and then, put those code even on textile, and textile isn't seen as art. So I guess the easy route is then, well, I put it on stretcher bars. Maybe it's art now. So I think that's a part of that answer to, I think into my journey of bringing pieces more into the physical space. I'm still kind of like early in that development of what I'm doing at the moment. I think the tattoo part is very interesting, especially into combination with the blockchain as well, where people think about permanence and conservation. I think I found a hack of how to actually conserve your NFTs forever. Yeah, I don't know if Alex has.
Yes, sure. So it's basically for me two things that are quite interesting. Like it has different possibilities to explore. Like if a work is just happening in the digital space, you have a different freedom compared to if you want to realize a prototype or an artifact. And of course, as an architect, we like to build stuff. With students, we make in each session or design studio, we create artifacts and small pavilions, but they come with constraints. So I work with these open generative systems, and it's like a sandbox. Like people can place anything inside. But if you want to build something, you need to introduce certain constraints. And this happened, for example, at the Linz project. There were some constraints so that it's buildable, that it doesn't fall over, that there was an intelligence in it. But these are design decisions to curate the output. It's very similar to a generative setup compared to the just digital outputs, where it doesn't matter if it needs to be built or not. If it's a very open and free software, I had the feeling that communities can also represent themselves. Like there's almost like in-game culture happening, that they start creating figures, that they start writing messages inside of these virtual environments. And this is something that's hard to bring to a sculpture, a physical sculpture. So it's kind of two things that I address. Yeah.
Yeah, from a museum space or institution perspective, I can only say we're learning always with the artists. So I'm always happy to hear more about also ideas, how to install or show spaces also here, works also here. And I would like to go back to technical but also aesthetical foundations of your works. Bernhard, maybe you want to start with answering the next question. That is for all of you. You integrate randomness, you all look at patterns, rhythms, shapes, dynamics. Alexander, you talked about floating and elastic, or sometimes also geometrical. So what is an orientation for you? You said Austrian culture in the end, so human shapes and life, or is there also nature and non-human life as orientation for aesthetics, or?
Yeah, for CryptoWiener, we orientate the baseline of our project around the Austrian culture, of course, and also human shapes, because we're portraying famous Austrian people in our first series. Then we also started to experiment with the GVN narratives. We also created the sausage stand, the Viennese sausage stand or Viennese coffee house in the metaverse. We also had some live parties in the metaverse. With free beer, we handed out wearables for the avatars as free beers. So the aesthetics of our project also played a big role in bringing the people together, making them interested in the Viennese culture, in the Austrian culture. We also had a lot of collectors from around the globe who were very curious to find out about the special words we have in our art and also the Viennese culture, for example, like Euder or Herst. And we tried to explain it with hand and feet in Discord. And then they also started using these words at the beginning or end of English sentences when we chatted around. So we felt also very happy to spread the Viennese Schmäh and flavor around the world with our project, and also stick to not abstract but known forms, of course, because we tried to also a little bit of rebuild the reality in the virtual world, but with a different twist, with another twist in the end.
Thank you. Yeah, you have all such different approaches, so it's quite fun to talk about aesthetics here. Anna, we learned about your crafts and saw some, but can you say something about your aesthetics and orientation again? Is there also nature and non-human life playing a role?
Yeah, I think a lot what determines the patterns is, I think I have my foot maybe in kind of the 60s, and what we saw yesterday talked about a lot like underlying mathematical systems, although they might not be as like apparent in my work directly as some of the older works. That is definitely the underlying systems that determine the patterns that you see. And I try to look for patterns that then also have mathematical formulas that express the same patterns that I see in old needlework books. So the Internet Archive is like my favorite place on the internet, and I scour it for like all types of obscure things. But like I have one big list of all these handbooks for needlepoint works. Like they're obviously, you know, ranging from 50 to 150 years old, or even maybe 200 years old, all directed at women and how to be maybe, you know, do their needlework. So I look at a lot at those images, and then try to find mathematical formulas and systems that can recreate those. So for example, the Conway Game of Life is one of those. You can see kind of needlework in there, but yeah, all types of things. So these two things inform each other. And you know, in a way, I work with pixels a lot as well, even though I think we do it in a very different way. There's also a shared aesthetic there.
So in my case, it's these open systems that I'm generating. They have certain qualities of the classical ones, a range between chaos and order, of redundancy and information. It's kind of a balance to create outputs that represent interesting moments. And I'm particularly interested when it's not a single logic, like a single script logic that generates a form, but if multiple opinions can shape this output. That happens, of course, with inviting people for co-creating. But sometimes I also try to integrate these ideas of multiple systems coming together in one script or generative setup. Kind of the interplay between this multi-logic is something that I'm really interested in, and to have some recognizable features of this that we can, for example, if I work with my students, I can recognize the shapes and know which student built this. And the same happened now with the NFTs and even with this sculpture, that I can recognize certain features, tectonic features that I can assign to the people who build it. And this is something that probably only I can see, but to me, that's enough.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have 2 minutes left. Let's try to, I don't know who wants to answer that question, a tiny bit about generative AI, because that's not really your practice, but I guess it's also something that you're kind of touching as a topic here and there. So I would just really like to hear whoever wants to answer, because you also work with younger artists and maybe teach them something about the value of art, or maybe you see problems. So is generative AI interesting for you at all? And yeah, what would you tell a whole generation of artists now working with it or not?
I think Alex can give a better answer, but for me, generative AI is a very interesting field. I played around with it, but not on the programming side, because I never learned it, which is very sad. But there are tools already so that I can also play around with AI in a generative way. And I don't think that we should have fear against AI and also include AI in our works. We can maybe see it as a new paintbrush that enables us to make new kinds of brush strokes onto the canvas. And we have to learn as an artist to use this new tool to make a different kind of concept into our artworks. Yeah.
I think time is over, is this right? Yeah, okay, so we carry on with our discussion about generative AI, generative art, and all of the platforms where we can exhibit. Thank you so much for your attention, and thanks for the talk.